Welcome. This will be my spoiler-free review of the 2021 video game Behind the Frame, The Finest Scenery. I am going to start by noting that I really loved this, and I guess there's not much of a preamble needed, really. I am not the first person to note that this feels very much like a Studio Ghibli. Hope I'm pronouncing that right. I don't want to be called a tourist. I don't want to be the anime man. I'm quite fond of those movies. I am not qualified to review actual anime movies, but this game, taking a lot of inspiration from it, is ultimately still a game, and those have been playing for 30 years. Not this one specifically. There is a lot of Miyazaki inspiration here, and yeah, I mean, I guess a couple of the ones that it reminded me a lot of. I want to say it's called Only Yesterday. I'm afraid my wrists are much too sore to look them up right now, but I believe it's called Only Yesterday. It's the protagonist is, there's something about like memories and past experiences and how they help inform the present day. And I was also reminded of, I believe it's called Kiki's Delivery Service, the flying witch. This thing of, having a task and trying to self-actualize, but there is something that is, in one way or another, slowing them down, and maybe they need to change something. I'm going to keep it vague so as to not spoil. Right down to, I would argue, autistic spectrum coding of the player character, and I say that with love. I've met dozens of people on the autistic spectrum. Many of them are wonderful. They are not lesser. But the fact that the player character has this set schedule, I appreciate. Some would say, well, that's an artist thing. Fair enough. There are a number of artists who do have that. I would argue there's a significant amount of overlap. And to be clear, I'm not saying every artist is on the spectrum or that everyone on the spectrum ends up becoming an artist or the like, but I definitely took that from it. Do I sound like I just always... I try not to read too much into things. I rarely succeed. I guess this is a good time to plug, if, for more like talk of autistic coding and such in media, Otterly Noah has done videos on it, and in general, I haven't watched everything he's done, but yeah, he makes a lot of really great videos. But basically, this is one of the ones where whether or not you end up liking it, a lot of the way boils down to expectations. If you have realistic expectations, yeah, that's you're more likely to like it. Or, you realize what the game is like before having played it somewhat. You might say, okay, that's just not my kind of thing. I'll be honest, this is not the kind of game I usually gravitate towards. I have played a few others that are similar. I would say the one that's most similar overall is probably Adios, albeit that one does have more interaction, including like physics stuff. You can pick up and drop stuff and such, and that one also enables WASD movement, and yeah, But both of these are these small, very personal stories that have some universal themes that, like, I haven't had experiences particularly similar to the player characters in these two games, but I really got emotionally invested because of what they're about, which, again, I'm avoiding spoiling on purpose. And yeah, other than that, it is somewhat similar to the Rusty Lake franchise. You click on things, and some of the time you're literally just, you click on a thing and it will just interact with that thing. It's not the um I guess I should specify old school point and click, because I don't play that many more recent point and clicks, and I guess there aren't as many as there used to be, which I do think is sad. I am very, very fond of point and click. I'm just usually more interested in the ones that are puzzle heavy, and I'll get into that for this one. But yeah, you're not selecting verbs, if we're going to go all the way back to the start of the graphical adventure game. And it also doesn't have, the kind of, like, you have just a few, like, a thing will pop up and you have a few options for choosing. No, you just click on a thing, And yeah, I guess this is a good time to note. So basically, this was free on Epic. I forget when. Looked at reviews, decided I wanted to play it, and here we are. I would not have been unhappy if I had paid for it, provided it had been discounted. But then I always say that, so I don't know how much that counts for. But yeah, I think let's move on to the yeah. Basically, there's a couple of things about the player character that are not spoilers, so I will just briefly. Basically, yeah, you play as this young woman. She's finishing off up her, several paintings to, basically try to make it big as a painter. And she has this routine that helps her paint. And I guess that pretty much, yeah. We do hear her, but I will say I've read that there's more to the game. I'm one of those people, at least today, when my wrists are too sore to play as much as I used to. When the credits roll, I consider the game completed, and I feel that I can make a review. I just try to specify, hey, I didn't 100% this, so it's possible that it appears elsewhere, but you're not necessarily going to hear her say words. Rather, you hear, like, little exclamations, and maybe there will be, inner monologue in text. Okay, yes, there is. And maybe there might be at least one line of dialogue, but it's text. And I have to admit, I do, it's possible that it's like, well, they couldn't really, secure enough time with the actor, so they settled for, I don't know. I liked it. I thought it really worked. I sometimes miss watching, I own a couple. Maybe I'll just sit down and watch silent movies, where the lines of dialogue appear as text on screen. I think that it has a charm to it. Overall, I do prefer talkies, but yeah. So every so often, you will trigger a cutscene where it changes to third-person perspective, and you see her engaging in something. And she definitely does feel like, it doesn't feel like they just 100% copied one of the Miyazaki protagonists, or other characters, but she'd feel right at home in one of these. And I guess that, but yeah, the rest of the time it is first person perspective. But yeah, I don't know, maybe I've been dancing around it. One of the best things I could say about this game is that it is essentially a slightly interactive Miyazaki movie. Of course, depending on your point of view, that might also be one of the worst things I can say about it. I've already described the basic gameplay. There is a little more to it. Since you are a painter, you do paint, that's the word, and you might also sketch something. And I'm not gonna lie, when I first read that, I was thinking, okay, I mean, it's a short game, I'm sure I'll get through it. It's not like super intimidating once you actually get to it. It just lends the gameplay a sense of accomplishment that, in my opinion, is crucial to some of what it is going for. Basically, a lot of the... I think I'll start with the sketching, because that was the thing that I especially read and was like, this is not... okay, I'll try, but it's not going to go well. I have not myself drawn anything in, I guess, 20 years. Yeah. I guess my sentence is almost up. I was bad at it, is what I'm getting at. But in this game, when you sketch something, it is basically dragging. You just you determine where the edges of the sketch, the edge of sketch, and where they are, and then you drag the mouse over the, whilst holding down LMB, over the that entire area, and the sketch will become reality there, much like the nightmare. And that was the thing that I neglected to mention at the top. I am not entirely sure, but I could imagine this might be rated E for everyone or something. It's definitely not a very, disturbing game. So, yeah, and this video will also be, E for everyone. But but yeah, so the painting, she has already, off screen before we got to play, let's see, she did the line work. Wow, it's been forever since I talked comic books in those kinds of details. I mean, she did the line work. All we're doing is the coloring. I don't know very much about painting. I have no idea if that's what it's called there, but I do know a little bit about comic books. It's an understatement. But I didn't work with it myself. I just love reading them. Anyway, basically, you fill in the color. And if you accidentally mess up, she's just going to go, no, I don't think that's right. And, it gets removed. But basically, you add in the color, and at the very start, you only have access to one color, and it's very clear, there's going to be more than one color in at least one of these paintings, and basically, as you progress, you'll get access to more color. And so it's very, very cleverly done, in my opinion. And it's, again, it's not going to be for everyone. And that's perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with someone not wanting this. And it's obviously, I don't know enough about anime to give the correct genre names, but I hope I have by now made it clear. Yeah, if your favorite anime is Akira, yeah, this is not your kind of thing. It is for, yeah, the Miyazaki kind of. I also read, there was one person, I'm afraid I forget their name. I'm thinking it was probably on Steam. They noted that this is the Frenchest thing that wasn't made by French people that they've ever encountered, and that is also very true. Yeah, I was definitely reminded of Amélie, the Jean-Pierre Jeunet, I believe, is the director's name. So yeah, and I guess this, yeah. So basically, over the course of the game, as you get these colors, you return to the painting and add in more colors, so you feel like you're getting closer, even as it is also there is a sense that there is something off, as earlier mentioned. And yeah, the way that she has her day scheduled, that I understand that some people really hate. So there's a couple of things there. For one thing, the gameplay loop at times can be very straightforward. That by itself bothers some, and I'm not saying they're wrong for that. Then there's the fact that the gameplay loop calls attention to itself, because her schedule is like written on paper in her apartment, so it's like, if you're one of the people who like to go into a game and just try everything, just experiment, yeah, this one's not necessarily going to be that much like, then on the other hand, I did find one negative review that said that they felt there was too little guidance. So it's, yeah. But the, yeah, I think that does pretty much cover the, yeah, I think, some people might feel like, well, there's too little, it goes back to the start of that loop too quickly and frequently. And I think it's important to note that there is a purpose. And again, I'm trying to remain vague, but that in that regard, it reminded me of the Rusty Lake entry. I always mix up. I want to say it's called the White Door, not the White Room, but it's one of those. In both of these, there's a very clear schedule, and you can look at and it'll say, hey, well, if you did this, then this thing is next. And I don't think I want to give away exactly what it does in either of these, but it is there for a purpose. It's not just like one really long tutorial or something. And I do really appreciate, I think, I very much enjoyed the aha moment when it dawned on me why there is this very specific schedule and very clear gameplay loop. And I think that does pretty much, yeah. So to an extent, you can move the camera, I want to say it's called 360 degrees. You can, not all the time, but you can somewhat look around, up, down, left, right, and such, with the mouse, not keyboard. And let's see. Yeah, they do a good job of keeping it very simple and straightforward. Like, this could be the first game you ever play. If you know someone who loves Miyazaki and doesn't hate the idea of trying at least one video game, yeah, I would definitely say this, it's essentially something nearly anyone can play. If you can use a mouse, like hypothetically, you could, I'm not sure there's very many things in this where yeah, puzzle, let's for the time being call it puzzle. I'm not sure there's really any that you couldn't, what's it called again? Brute force, if you really wanted to, and the yeah, so basically, there is a you keep a record of the things that you draw and like stuff you find around. Yeah, and you can always consult that, and I thought they did a good job of making sure that it did feel like, like by the end of the game, I felt like, oh wow, I did kind of find a lot of stuff in this game. And yeah, it is quite linear. Now the atmosphere. This is very cozy and soothing and just like, yeah, it's a great way to relax. Like every so often I see negative reviews of games that are difficult by people who say, hey, I work hard, I just want to relax with a game. This might be your game. It's kind of like the opposite of Donald Trump, but yeah, I really felt I got swept up in like it's been a very long time since I thought of myself as someone who would like make a living off like creativity. Um, and I certainly never even remotely entertained the idea of becoming a painter. But yeah, I got really attached to the idea. I really wanted to see her become a famous painter. And obviously, I'm not going to give away whether that happens or not. But yeah, if it sounds like you too might find yourself, in that kind of, then yeah, it might be your kind of thing. And yeah, I thought it worked really well. That the cutscenes. So it's important to note during the regular gameplay, it doesn't always feel completely like the 2D kind of um, Miyazaki. Sometimes it feels more like, I have to admit I'm not super familiar with, but I'm aware that there is some Studio Ghibli, 3D. I'm not, going to get into it. I'll just note some of the gameplay feels more like the 3D, but the cutscenes, tend to be the 2D. And the transition between them is quite smooth. It doesn't feel like it's just something completely different, which is obviously, that can be a problem for games, especially ones that are this careful to immerse you. And yeah, the graphics are really great. Like, I am so happy that stuff is being made that understands, hey, color, shadow, use of lighting, like it can really add a lot if you're animating something. It's yeah, I I think I sometimes watch a little bit too much stuff that's a little too toned down. Um, I guess in layman's terms, MCU. I still love most MCU stuff, but I do really appreciate when they do stuff, to also have media like this. And the sound design is fantastic. It's making something cozy can be difficult, and sound can be a major part because you don't want it silent. That's creepy. That's off-putting. I guess I'll briefly note there is at least one thing in this that I think an argument can be made that's a little disturbing and like, is that okay? But by and large, it's not really. Like, there was a time where I thought, oh, are we going there? And we didn't. Uh, anyway, the yes, some of the sound design includes, you can hear rain hit the surfaces on the outside, and it's just, yeah, it's very, very comforting and just, yeah. The music is really solid. There's several different moods that it has to evoke. Some of the time, it's crucial that we, the player, feel something that the player character is feeling, but we don't see her face. So the music, and again, don't hear her voice. So that's very important. So I suppose I've pretty much already said it's not really ever challenging. It's one of those things where, so I said earlier I used the word puzzle, and I said for the time being. The time for calling them puzzles is past. These are not puzzles, these are tasks. And that, again, I try to say this each time that I make the distinction in a video. I don't think tasks are inherently lesser, but obviously, like, if this was sold to you as, like, point and click, and to you, point and click is Rusty Lake or Monkey Island, you know, like, yeah, you're gonna, this, I think I've pretty much made clear the differences, but yeah, there are significant differences, but yeah, like, I was very much, you know, invested. I really wanted to see what would happen next, even if it wasn't difficult to get there, and it did still, like, they do enough to give a sense of accomplishment, you know? And yeah, so basically replayability, I understand that there are things that, you know, if you just play through once, you might not get everything. There is a level select, so you don't have to play all the way from the very start to the very end more than once if there's just little things you want to, yeah. So, in most of my recent videos, there haven't really been bugs or glitches in the games that I talk about. This is not 100% the case here. I think I'll start by noting that it doesn't, the game never, for me, froze or crashed or anything like that. And there is a fix. Basically, so before I describe the problem, I want to give you the fix. Basically, if you press escape twice, you know, so it'll ask, hey, do you really want to quit? And then you know, press escape again to bring that away. It doesn't always work immediately. Sometimes you have to do it multiple times. And there were times where I did just kind of, I'm not sure if it was waiting it out, if it just did it eventually on its own, or it was because I just kind of clicked randomly. But those were the things that worked for me. But yeah, the bug, or I guess glitch. Let's go with glitch. The text, the inner monologue, it gets stuck. More than once. Like, overall, I guess it's, let's see, 5 to 10% of those prompts, I think, stuck. And some of them didn't stick for very long. 1 or 2% stuck for longer. It does harm the immersion, at least a little. I cannot claim that it doesn't. And it is it's frustrating for you know, it's a game that's very short. I mean, I don't develop games, so I don't know. It's possible that it would be very difficult to do something about, but it definitely does hurt an otherwise very carefully polished final product. There is more than one setting, and personally I thought they made the right choice in how many there are and what they are and how you, the things that you do in them. Let's go with that. I guess it's also, okay, so this isn't really a glitch, but there were definitely times where I was a little unclear on, you know, where exactly am I supposed to click? And so you end up just kind of clicking on, you know, like you'll try to think of, well, I guess this makes sense as a place to click, but there were times, I guess, yeah, 1 to 2% of the time, I ended up just kind of clicking a bunch of different places. Like, I would start with the ones that felt obvious to me, but before I moved on to the next part, yeah, I had been clicking at least a little bit in a place where I could not tell you why I was supposed to click there, or if maybe I wasn't, but the text was sticking. And yeah, the environmental storytelling is very strong here. A lot is conveyed in that regard. And yeah, so I already mentioned they're not really puzzles, they're more tasks, but I will say they do make sure there are more than, yeah. Um, okay, I'm not going to list them, but I will just say, yeah, there are several different. Oh, I guess, okay, yeah, so it's not a spoiler to say, yeah, on at least one occasion, you do have to, well, yeah, I guess it's essentially still, basically, you once you have deduced, which tends to be easy, sometimes it straight up gives you the answer and you just have to apply it. Once you know what to do, you basically just have to do it, and they don't need you to be like extremely specific, and you just have to do the basic right thing. And yeah, I think that does cover. I thought they did a good job on the length of it. It was long enough that I felt like a full story was told. Not so long that it stretched past, you know, essentially it is, yeah, there is a story, there's some thematic stuff going on, but it is not something like, I definitely think if this was a third longer than it is, like before you reach the end credits, I mean, I don't know exactly how long it is if you go for 100%, but I think it would probably end up being like, okay, this is not quite enough. It's similar to how, Dear Esther, and I already mentioned Adios, yeah, some of these games, very short. The couple of times that Rusty Lake did something that was very, very simple and straightforward, those also tended to be very, very short. Their longer ones are more complex. But I think that does pretty much cover everything. Yeah, just yeah, that does cover everything. So I rate this 8. Emotionally engaging stories told in a way that's just interactive enough that you do feel like you're doing something and not just like clicking through maybe a web comic. I'm not dissing web comics. Out of 10.